Are you there, Shane?
Kia ora, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Josh's
Probably
thumb
not
wasn't...
a good idea for the politician to be nullified over the phone.
No, not at all. Hey, good to hear your voice this morning. How's that? Where are you at on the campaign trail today?
Well, actually, I came down to Auckland to work with, spend a bit of time with one of our other candidates, Tanya Unkovic. She's standing against David Seymour in the seat of Epsom.
With a name like that, is she another one of your Delhi cousins?
Yes, she hails from Dargaville. Yeah, no. There's a lot of us in the north who've got an itch.
Yep, definitely the bitches up there.
Just don't put the word B and the letter B in front of it, okay?
I remember
don't mind W.
You won't want me talking about this, but I do remember the Savinoviches and some of the others.
Right, yeah. Oh, well, what goes on tour stays on tour.
Yeah, the days of fishing. I'm always going to write that book. Shane, just in terms of the campaign, we saw the big poll this week, and I'm predicting that there'll be a landslide for National. You guys are just sort of got your fingers on the precipice, I suppose, or just almost there. What is your internal polling showing?
Yeah, we obviously, when necessary, we do our own polling, and we're extremely confident that with such a large percentage of Kiwis undecided, but more importantly, often afraid, a bit like prior to the Trump election, to actually share and be open as to what are the motivators for their voting behaviour this time round. And Winston, I believe we know exactly what they are. But, there is a climate of anxiety and fear in New Zealand, and there has been a certain level of both self-censorship and censorship. So, no, we're very confident we'll be well and truly over the 5%. Naturally, I'm acquitting myself to the best of my ability here in the north against the national farmer, Grant McCullum, and the elusive sitting member, Willow Jean Prime, and Matt King, who used to hold the seat, and a lady from...
I haven't heard anything from him. He hasn't been on the airwaves or anything. It's like he's radio silence.
Yeah, I think he's working the nooks and crannies there in Northland. But this is going to be a drag race between myself and the National Party candidate.
Right. And in terms of, look, I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole of who's going to talk to who after the election, because it's all just moot until that day. But if you were looking across and you already ruled out the Labour Party, which I thought was quite interesting, and I heard the ad this morning, which made it very, very clear that you guys are definitely not going with Labour. That's the end of that. So you only have a choice on the right, and that's where you're going to coalesce. But you haven't talked about what that might look like, whether you're going to sit on the crossbenches or whether you're going to go on boots and all. And so what's your feeling if you get there as to which way you're going to go?
Most important thing is the country needs stable leadership. The country needs a mix of leadership that enables us to deal with the deep fundamental failings that are blighting us at the moment. And we cannot afford a rollout of either policies or vanities that have never been campaigned on. And it's purely because of that, I believe, that Jacinda rise to 50-odd% and then sinking down, who knows, that could even strike Bill English's nadir.
Yes.
I put it against nothing but the fact they did far too much for which they had no moral authority, no democratic mandate, and they had not tested. At least John Key went and asked the electorate whether or not they should have a new flag.
Yeah.
Labor did none of that, and that's why Labor's in this tailspin, and I can't see how they can break out of it short of some volcanic intervention. And I think even if they change Chippy as the leader, it's highly unlikely.
There's no one left
to stand up. There's no one left, yeah. And for those reasons, I think Kiwis just want a far more stable, and that's a message also to the parties on the right. Some of the lurching behaviour that the ACT Party is currently showing, and also the vanilla quality of the delivery of the Chrome Dome, the leader of the National Party, Mr. Luxon. If he doesn't watch out, he's going to be dismissed as ScoMo, New Zealand's version of ScoMo.
Yeah, hang on a minute though. Here's the thing, and I keep saying this to people. The National Party was a fractious bunch of people who were caught in the headlights and had multiple leadership changes and didn't know whether as my dad would say, whether their ass was it board or countersunk? Yeah, punch board or countersunk. In other words, they were useless, right? And it was sad when you're a card-carrying National Party member like me to see that happen. And then along comes Luxon, and the place goes quiet. And even though that he doesn't get external traction, there is no coups. There is no leaking. Everyone sings from the same song sheet, apart from bloody Michael Woodhouse today, who needs to fair up his ring gear too. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, he's on his way out. It's been signalled. See you later. Get over it and go and find something else to do. But other than that, there has been nothing. And to me, that is the hallmark of a bloody good leader. And I mean, let's face it, as much as I dislike Winston, you can never, ever say that he's not a good leader of his own troops. That's one thing he does really well.
No, full marks to the fact that they're no longer quarrelling and bickering and fighting.
And that's it. That's what we need. We need leadership. And that's why I think I am really comfortable with Chris Luxon as a leader on that basis. You know, at the end of the day, this is a political landscape like we've never seen before. And, you know, elections were pretty much sort of like the same thing over and over again. This one is different. It's got a different feel to it. The media's different. We've found out the bloody government's using paid stories on TV1. And so everything's changed. Nobody trusts and everyone's opinions are disparate all over the place. It's really hard to pick. And the only thing we can really have to get us out of that is bloody good leaders. And that's why I think Chris Luxon is the guy for this time. Might not be charismatic, but he actually is a good leader, and he's showing that by keeping the National Caucus together. And Winston does the same.
Well, you know, but you know, running the country is far more complicated than just managing your own
But he
caucus.
can run things. That's the other issue. And the other side has fallen down because they've never run a bloody thing. They've never been in business. They've never run big organisations. Nothing. Nada. And it shows. It clearly shows in the fact that they've never been able to look after their own government departments. And you know how hard this is. And look, this morning, the Post has a story from Andrea Vance where the new deputy chief executive of the Department of Internal Affairs, Karen Vercoe, who both you and I know who she is, she had a porphyry that cost $17,000. $17,000. Now, if you're a government and seeing that happen time and time again, and I can guarantee that if there was OIAs that actually were given out at the right time over the next few weeks, we would see dozens and dozens of this type of excess in government departments. So again, we've got an administration that can't run a government and its departments. So where is the New Zealand First bit in the new leadership that's going to help sort that stuff out? What's your plan?
Well, your listeners know that probably no politician delivered the same level of impact that I did with that Provincial Growth Fund. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy around some of the projects, but our approach was to focus, incentivise and boot the bureaucracy along to earn their overinflated salaries. That's the first thing. The second thing, the model of the SSC, which has got a new name, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Public Services Commission or something, I think.
Yeah. But I have argued for a long time that we should have a version of the Aussie model, that a new government can come in and demand the resignation or the replacement of key CEOs who are then hired from elsewhere, and they are required to deliver on KPIs reflective of what the government wants to achieve over a 3-year period.
Yep.
Now, that was shot down by Labor, and it's been an item of great discussion in our own party, And sadly, it would represent quite a major inversion of how the public sector system is due to work. But one of the major challenges that we have in New Zealand is that the frontline services have shriveled, yet the managerial bureaucracy has expanded.
Tell me about it.
And successive governments have allowed that to happen. And in that regard, that will be a key outcome that our party is keen to see changed. And look, I've already shared on your program other things. We have far too much. Let's just take, for example, climate change. Okay, climate change has, in many cases, been weaponised in political debates in New Zealand.
Yes.
The voices are shrill, the language is inflammatory, facts are conquered and disappear under hysteria on a regular basis.
We also have the millstone around our neck that we're tied into international agreements that we can't get out of, or I can't see our way through.
Take one of those agreements. Take one of those agreements. The Paris Accord clearly says that the reduction of emissions must not threaten
food security,
food generating capacity.
That's right.
Okay, that is in. Have you ever heard a Wellington bureaucrat? Have you ever heard the Climate Change Commission highlight that?
No.
What is New Zealand if it is not a world-leading food-producing nation?
Exactly.
What do we hear? New taxes on farmers, new national policy statements, a new Resource Management Act, and other climate obligations that are going to drive cockies who are already losing income because of volatility in international commodity prices out of existence. Unless we unravel, deconstipate this red tape, we're going to be like a body that's being attacked from a tape-like worm in the vital organs. That will be the outcome.
But you know how hard this is. You had MB, and MB was a big giant, and I remember you really thought you'd be able to go in there and sort some shit out. And you were largely unsuccessful. The beast maintained this, it was the same. Nothing much changed in there. You did have the Ministry of Forestry, and it was extremely well run by Julie Collins, and it did some stuff. Let's get that out there. But when it come to running MB, I think I'm not convinced that even you managed to make much of a dent on the failings of a public service like they were.
Well, MB was created by your pin-up boy Stephen Joyce.
Yes, and it was a good idea. I totally understand why he did it.
No. It cannot have been a good idea given the level of dysfunctionalism that has visited upon New Zealand.
But isn't that because it hasn't had a good sort of governance over top of it, saying, nah, get rid of that? No,
okay, so when I arrived at 2017, the culture of MB was the culture that subsisted under his leadership. And I would say to you that the small level of the bureaucracy that was responsible for rolling out the PGF, also with an independent committee chaired by a very proud South Islander, Roger Finlay, we got stuff done.
Yep.
Had I been put in charge of the state services sector like Chippy was, first thing I would not have done was given them more power. They have become more independent. They are capable of generating their own salary bands, and they have, quite frankly, lost interest in taking risks and getting things done in New Zealand. They've become dab hands at outsourcing risk, outsourcing responsibility, but upwardly moving their emoluments and salaries, and that drastically has to change.
Yep. Okay. Hey, look, I have to be able to poke the borax at you occasionally, and there is a text here, and someone seems to be I have a bit of a bee in their bonnet, and someone says, how can you trust Jones because he backed up Ardern over the oil stuff. So, you supported Ardern stopping oil and gas explorations. You could have stopped that, but you didn't. And what made you back Ardern up over oil and gas?
So that decision goes back about 6 years ago.
Yep.
And I'm on my way to New Plymouth, to the energy conference that's put aside for politicians. And I'll be laying out the New Zealand First policy when I get there. The kabuki faces that person possibly saw when I was standing next to Jacinda in 2018, when she made that statement, ought to be consigned to history. Our party is very much committed to supporting and changing the law to unleash the wealth.
So you were swallowing a dead rat.
Well, it's called politics, darling.
Yeah, I know. But still, at the end of the day, those are the things that people are remembering, and they are the things that are saying, you had to suck up that dead rat. You didn't fight hard enough, and we ended up with the problems with oil and gas explorations as a result of you supporting Ardern on that. And that's a justifiable criticism.
Yeah, the industry is dynamic, though. Let's just wait and see what the policy is that we're rolling out in several weeks' time.
Yeah.
But look, we remain very supportive. But I also want people that send in those texts.
Yep.
Do they hold John Key to the standard, along with the ACT Party and the Māori Party, that I hold them to? If they had never have signed the Declaration of Indigenous Rights in 2010, we wouldn't be bogged down in these very divisive racist debates on both sides of the equation.
Yep.
Both sides of the equation, highly polarised about co-governance.
Yep.
That singularly was brought into New Zealand when John Key. A lot of your National Party listeners, they like to believe two people walked on water, Jesus and John Key. Well, one of them was crucified, and the other left us with the Indigenous Rights Declaration from the UN.
Now,
which is proving to be a cross to bear.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from on that. And that sort of highlights another point of Māori activism, and you would have lost someone that you would have had a lot of respect for with Dun Mihaka's passing this week. And I remember interviewing Dun when he came to Invercargill selling his book, and I was just telling Mum on my way over in the car this morning of my Dun story, which was we'd done the interview on the radio. And anyway, I said to Dun, it was about midday, and I said, do you want to go over next door for a drink? And he goes, only if you're shouting. And I said, okay. And then he says, but you got to buy my book. And I said, I'm not buying your bloody book. I'm going to shout you a beer. And he goes, no, I'm not going to go for a drink that you're going to pay for unless you buy my book. So I bought this bloody book. He was as cunning as a shithouse rat, but you had to love it. It was so much fun.
Bit of Ngāpuhi marketing there.
He sold more than one copy in the radio station that day. But I understand that you were the interpreter. Story. You were the interpreter when he was in court. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so Dun Mihaka, his name was Te Ringa Mangu, the Dark Hand. His whānau are from the heart of Ngāpuhi. He's a great speaker of the language. He was a pretty handy boxer as well, although he did meet his Waterloo when he took on a bloke from out of the Sass, another Māori fellow from Hokianga. His name was Witty McMath. And you don't get in the Sass by mistake, as you know, Tina. But anyway, all those old war stories apart. We were at St. Stephen's School, 1975. Dame Thinner arrives with Matakite March, and then Dun slipped off, and he led a small fragment of that march around the East Coast. And then I, in university in 1978, I think, go to a big tangi with Dr. Pat Hoheper, and I was speaking on the marae on behalf of the Māori students. And Dun comes up to me, and it transpired he knew my relations up in Kaitaia and whatnot. And later on, I go down to Wellington, and it was a protest activity, and it led to some court cases and whatnot. And I ended up being an interpreter for him at a very, very young age. Mm. And he was, he's a physically fearsome sort of character, but he was ahead of his time. He was ahead of his time in terms of, I guess, demanding more responsiveness from the state and from the police. And he became incredibly unpopular amongst mainstream society and with a lot of Māori, but he had the tenacity to stand up for what he believed was right. And now he did show it in a very provocative way to the British Crown.
Yes. When
Prince Charles, I think in 80 or 81, went through Porirua, and he was greeted not by the brown-skinned Papa Haka party, but the brown hole from the rear end of Dun Mihaka.
And a very muscly. He was quite a strapping bloke. He wasn't fat. Not when I saw him, anyway.
No, he kept himself in good nick. He did, and his whānau, the Mihakas, are a well-known whānau in the North Island, and his brothers who worked in the freezing works were even bigger men. And Dun actually lived in Australia for a while, and sort of earned his stripes over there. But anyhow, he certainly became incredibly active in that period of the 70s and 80s in terms of Māori rights activism.
Yeah. No, and he was good to have a beer with, and it was interesting because I always remember we were in the back bar of the Calvin, and there was people came up all over the place, all different hues of colour, race and creed and society, and we all sat and had quite a good afternoon chewing the fat. And he was happy in that space.
But let's rekindle that wairua. Let's recover that type of dynamic where Kiwis of all stripes and colours, we just bump and grind and all get along.
Oh, dockside on a Friday afternoon was pretty good at doing that.
Yeah. No, in fact, I'm spending a large part of my campaign doing that.
Yeah, you'd be watching the rate. Your weight. Is Doc looking after your diet?
Yes. No, I've got my wife who's always sort of a bit like a well-groomed, colourful native bird on my shoulder.
That's good.
My fighting weight was 100 kgs, but I'm well and truly over that at the moment. But hey, when you campaign, stamina, resilience is very important, which is why I've got nothing but respect for our leader, Winston Peters. His durability, it's extraordinary. And look, we always boost our level of effort and activity when we get into the last 6 to 8 weeks of the campaign. And you are going to see, mark my words, a significant increase in our 5% and beyond, because we've got the issues that are resonating with people that may not be accurately reflected at this stage in the polls, but there's still a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of people that are flocking to the message that Winston is articulating.
Yeah, well, I'll put money on a landslide for National. I'd be a bit more reticent about putting money on you getting over that 5%. You'll go close, but I think there's still a lot of baggage there with Labor. That people aren't getting, and there's a few texts coming through saying the same sort of thing. That at the end of the day, it's that relationship you had in the past with Labor, and will you do the same with National? And
hey, Tina, can you ask those people that are sending texts and do they belong to a hapu? Because they seem to be living in the past, like we accused the Māoris of doing.
So you reckon you learnt from your terrible years at the foot of Jacinda?
Hey, it's MMP. We went out and campaigned and got 7.5% of the vote. We had a manifesto. We put the manifesto, which derived its moral authority from the votes that we got from our fellow Kiwis in front of the National Party and the Labour Party. The National Party were indifferent. If anything, they were close to dismissive of what we wanted to achieve in a government with whoever. As a consequence of their lack of enthusiasm and ineptitude at negotiating, Jacinda, Grant, Annette King and Calvin Davis, their little team, enabled New Zealand to achieve what it campaigned on wanting to achieve. What was that? Recapitalising the military.
Rooting the country.
1,800 new police. 1,800 new police and the Provincial Growth Fund. And we were a fantastic restraining influence until COVID arrived, made unemployed, and 50%.
Hey, look, I'm an indirect recipient of the PGF for the Trust Down Home, and I always understood what you were trying to do.
But when people are texting in and bitching and moaning about Winston, please remind them 52% of their second cousins voted for Jacinda, and they didn't vote for Shane Jones and Winston. So, hello, why are you surprised what we've got?
And we'll leave that there, Shane. It's been
always great to talk with you, mate.
It is, and definitely we have to have a lunch at Dockside next time you're in town.